Hi, and welcome to CryptoBiography. I'm your host, Brandon Starr, and this is episode 152. It's a standalone short story called Getting Warm. And I'm getting this podcast out a little bit late today, right when I was about to start recording. Right across the street, which is actually the closest side to my windows, someone started running a power washer, followed up by a leaf blower. So, yeah, I had to give him some time to finish that up. But we're on it now. This story is a little unusual in that it is from a couple of years ago when I first decided to take up writing again. I was an English major in college. I did with a writing emphasis, and and then I did writing sort of here and there. And I found that what works for me is I need like someone that I need to take my writing to, who is going to receive it and check it out, and that promise, like regardless of whether they end up reading it or not, that just the promise that I'm going to like get them something on a regular basis is enough to keep me writing. And I did do some writing this week, in terms of news stories. It's sort of a longer piece, though, and I'm really having kind of a hard time getting it going the way I want it to. So it wasn't really ready. Let's put it that way. Plus, I had some things come up, and mostly good, actually, but some things came up, and I was just not able to complete it. So I went back to my earlier writing. So I was doing some writing, and then I would give it to a friend, Kimmy, actually, if you've heard the early episodes. And I don't know if she ever really read very many of them. It's hard to tell. But that wasn't the point. The point was I made a promise I would, that I would get whatever I wrote to her on a regular basis. I think it was weekly, something like that. Maybe it was bi-weekly. And that was enough to keep me writing. Just that making that promise is enough. It doesn't really even matter if the person, reads it or not. I've done the same thing. I did the same thing with my wife when she was alive. I said, hey, I'm going to write like a novel length piece. And I did that. And I basically just gave it to her. And so on. So it works. Anyway, so this was about 3 years ago. And this is one of the very first stories that I wrote once I started coming back up. And that's just interesting to me because I've noticed that like there are certain features of this that are similar to the way I'm writing still. So apparently this is like the way that I'm writing is like very accurate to like just kind of the way I naturally write. So I hope you enjoy this. It's a little piece. Basically, I was, at the time, this is obviously well before coronavirus or anything else. I was thinking about, how we have global warming. It is happening, and yet, people are trying to deny it. And especially, we had known at this point that the energy companies back in the 80s, when the climate science was actually starting to get itself together and kind of figure out what was going on, even back then, we know that the energy companies were putting out propaganda, essentially just false reports, bad science, basically making up, studies that were designed to show the opposite of what the rest of the climate science was showing. And I just kind of projected that into the future and just wrote a little piece on it. And it's a little short, but it's entertaining in its way, and I hope you like it. It's called Getting Warm, and here we go. It had taken a couple of decades, but it happened, and even faster than anticipated. Most of Florida was drowned. Venice was history, even more than it had ever been. Washington, D.C., always underwater fiscally, was now underwater literally, despite heroic efforts to stem the tides. Not everyone was sorry to see it go. New York was a series of metal skeletons poking up out of the water. Even less was to be seen of New Orleans. Los Angeles was now beachfront, but that hardly helped the real estate market. Much of Tokyo had gone, though in typical efficient fashion, the damage was limited by proper planning and unpanicked transitional activities. The same could be said for many of the Eastern Asian coastal cities. Still, Japan, already densely populated, was positively crowded, and not even their famous low birth rate was enough to keep people from feeling claustrophobic. In China, the transition went smoothly, but the after effects were grim. Remaining already full cities became packed tight, and the government generally refused anyone moving into the precious remaining farmland. Instead, great cities were hurriedly constructed in the deserts of the West. The death rate in those cities became horrific. London, which had stopped being a major financial capital about a decade after it exited the EU in the late teens, vanished altogether, though just barely, as it had tried and failed once more to hold on to the lands it held as an empire. Though electric cars were the norm and CO2 emissions had been limited, it had simply taken too long, and the effects were too much like a runaway train. That short-term thinkers had dragged their heels on making any changes sealed the deal. While many fertile lands were subsumed by the ocean, the effect was so slow that the population had not dropped. Thus, food started to become more and more expensive. Food shortages and riots became part of the news around the globe. Here, the United States was relatively fortunate, having large areas of well-developed, extremely fertile lands not destroyed by the rising waters, and enough space to put people. But no longer were they exporting cheap food or donating food to countries unable to feed their populations. Canada, now warmer and also relatively unscathed, became more of a breadbasket and was able to continue exporting and donating food for some time. But look at that. A goddamn documentary. Didn't think anyone bothered anymore. Shut it off. Of course, it all went to shit in the end, didn't it? Despite the planning and the assurances and all the bullshit. I had my own plan, though. I was one of the last of the Mohicans. The last damn oil and gas company out there before they finally went extinct. The way of the dinosaurs. You know, there are rumors around here that they would round up the executives and execute them? Well, a few $100 million will get you out of any scrape, no matter what inflation and panic had done to money in the last few years. I had enough. Enough to escape, enough to feather a nest somewhere real good. And I had things people would want. The world was drowning, and I had a raft company. Well, it's tougher now. Damn near dog eat dog, with a thin veneer of civilization just holding it together. Hell, that game's for suckers. It's rigged. Was for decades. Even before I made my millions. If you or your family, or maybe your friends, aren't watching for you, then you're in trouble. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon, and for the rest of your short-ass life. Damn lungs. Too many cigars. They told me not to inhale them, but fuck them. Those doctors are all dead. Anyway, I made me a nice compound out here, stocked well, and with just a few people around me, some bodyguards and a few lucky ladies for entertainment. Entertainment is the last of the luxury items, my friend. The first profession, and now the last. Family? All dead. Never had kids. Wife? Well, she was past her prime. Cut her loose when I came out here. I guess she might be alive. Would take a miracle, though. Nah, I got my ladies, and you know what? Every damn one of them is baby hungry. Even now, with all this going on. Maybe especially now. Maybe when the shit goes down, it's like game on for pussy. Wouldn't surprise me. Always heard weird things about fertility in times of trouble. Like when there's been a war, the percent of boys being born increases. Like the women are busy filling the ranks for the next war 20 years later. They spit 'em out so we can mow 'em down. And now with everyone dying, the few ladies left all want to try and fill the world up again. Anyway, every other family member's older than me. Was, that is, all gone. Most of them gone before it went bad. Lucky bastards. Not a lot of historians are going to write about this, but if they do, they'll call the generation that died 10, 20 years ago the lucky generation. Interesting times. So the question is, what are you going to do? I can live here for quite some time, ride it out, and who knows, maybe father some babies. Nice thing about being a man, doesn't matter what age you are. Charlie Chaplin was over 70 when he had his last kid. Bet your ass that boy didn't have daddy watching him when he graduated high school. But of course, you're not going to let it go at that. You're the one with the gun after all. And I'm guessing that my bodyguards are all dead. Too bad. Some of them were even halfway decent men. The ladies all right? Good. Wouldn't want the broodmares killed off. Even if you decide to kill me, someone's got to carry on. At least that's what everyone always says, don't they? Propagate the species. Well, hell, who am I to do any different? Almost makes me wish I did have one of the wives pop out a brat or two. But then none of them did. Who knows, maybe it was me. Maybe I can't. Since you killed my bodyguards, I guess it's up to you. Sound of sudden movement. Shit! Sound of gunfire. End recording. Archaeologist note. This recording, in remarkably good shape and with a playback machine we were able to make functional, was found atop the body of a man who had been stuffed into a small, sealed crate. The body had suffered a gunshot wound, as the recording hints at, but then multiple injuries causing grievous wounds all across the man's body. Indications are that some of the wounds had slightly healed and the man had been in extremis for many hours, possibly days. The exact reason for the torture is not clear. Some wounds may have been made in a symbolic manner, but the sheer number of injuries makes it difficult to decipher. The man's identity is not known, but given the hints scattered throughout his monologue, we may well be able to determine at some point in the future when more historical records are recovered. And that's the story for today. Hope you enjoyed it. Like I say, I am working on a longer piece and just didn't have enough of it ready this week, so I'm looking forward to doing some more writing this week for that. And if you have any comments or questions about this episode or previous episodes, CryptoBiography@gmail.com or hit us up on Facebook or Twitter. And thanks for listening. Words and music, copyright 2020, CryptoBiography LLC, all rights reserved. Characters and events are fictional, fictionalized, or satirical.